We're going to do a modern breakdown of the political spectrum, um, and just try to be empathetic towards everybody's view because everybody can have like a positive and negative reflection. So just think of it like a card game, right? And this is actually taken from um, pre-revolutionary Russia, right? So before it became the Soviet Union, you had this breakdown. And what you have to understand is like these breakdowns are part of, well, these kind of balkanizations, we could call it, different perspectives in society are kind of natural to groups of humans, right? And you could call it late stage empire. And so you'll see this repeating through history, and you see a similar balkanization today, meaning separation, right? So now, the first mistake people make is like, oh, these people are categorically evil. Um, believe that they all have good intentions, believe they can all be warped, right? And so let's talk about who's in charge now, right? You have um, corporate Republican and you have Black 100, right? So this is like the businesses, like you want to talk like Tesla or Google, um, Oracle, for example, like the tech giants have kind of rallied around the Republicans at the moment, and they have like a strange bedfellows as far as partnering with the Black 100, you can call it, like um, the fundamentalist Christians, um, the more pure the puritanical, you could say, Christian. So without being like pejorative in any way. Okay, so traditionalists, we could call it, right, with the corporatists. And now you have this struggle in between the party, right? Because you have business interests that don't quite align, which is like the Lindsey Grahams, the Marco Rubios, any kind of like neocon elements, conflicting with the Ron Paul wing, with the Marjorie Taylor Greens, with the that wing of the party. And then the mirror of the Marjorie Taylor Greens is like um, AOC, right? Or Bernie Sanders. So you have the left wing as well. They're vying for power. They have localized power. They have some majority of like the youth women. Like these are majority youth men, and these are majority youth women. Okay, so you have that breakdown, and that's like the most extreme polarization that it's seen. And we're figuring out how to work because these people have the money, but they don't have the political power, right? This is intellectual power, this is monetary power. They don't have political power, so they have to kind of partner, right? So now you have the we can call this Mitch McConnell, we can call this Nancy Pelosi, for example, partnering with the AOCs to try to get something done. They need political power. They have political capital or institutional capital, right? So they control the colleges, for example. Okay. So this is the breakdown here, right? And so you have these people in charge. You have the corporatists that have some motivation, but they need to partner with somebody to get political power. They may have financial power, right? Okay. So and then but in all these stages they have dark versions, right? So you could call this January 6th would be a dark version, and then you have the Minneapolis riots, the George Floyd riots, for example, would be a dark version of this, right? Good intentions, warped, manipulated, and ended up backfiring. Okay. And so where do we go, right? These people, are kind of against the corporatists, right? So they're looking here and they're saying the corporatists are the greedy corporations are driving the prices up, and these people are fascists, they're Nazis, okay? And that's a catastrophization, of that aspect of the party in modern America. I mean, nobody's getting ethnically cleansed or anything like that. So it's not helpful in my argument to catastrophize on either way. Like, let's say loony lefties, it's loony lefties. Well, if there's no motivation to build a fair society, then they the greedy just take everything. Or these people try to control these people, and so they'll try to institute bureaucratic communism and take the power from the capitalists, right? But who's to say, like, if you get that type of situation, who's to say that they give power, right? Or who's to say that they evenly distribute it, right? So a lot of times, like in Venezuela, you have the institutions eating the capitalists. They'll cleanse the fundamentalists, or the fundamentalists will migrate out, okay? And then they'll get power here, right? So this is where their political power comes in with the moderate and the leftist extremists, right? But they use the leftist extremists to, one, take out the corporatists, they take control, and now who do they fear? Really, the people that took them out, because they want to concentrate power themselves. So they cleanse, quote unquote, cleanse. It's usually like in the last century, it was a genocide, really. They would cleanse their extreme part of their party and then use their more moderates for political party. What happens in Venezuela is they got more and more power, more and more greedy, and then what happened is you have the slow degradation of the supporters to where a small amount of supporters try to keep in line everybody else, right? Whoever was left. And the capitalists were reduced to like black market capitalists, right? So you could still make money, but it would be like on a black market. And that's kind of what happens in communism now. You have the Chinese, so the Chinese went through that process. The Russians went through that, and they came out the other side to where they decided to integrate more capitalist elements. And so while they were still in charge, they had this controlled, right? And they were able to get stronger and they're more organized, right? Okay. So that's the kind of breakdown of how societies tend to go to communism. What we propose as is there a way to make everybody happy, right? Because right now we have this, but you know, this is kind of shrunk a little bit, but they still rely on them to get their base. And I don't think about personalities. I think about power structures, right? So how do we make this work? Well, what you have like a Musk doing is is making homages to this structure, right? To the moderate socialists, we have universal high income, right, as the vision. And these people aren't quite on board. They're like, oh, you just have to burn the system down and it's unfailable. The problem is, nothing's ever positive's ever resulted from chaos. Like you can burn a system down. What is your alternative? What happens is usually from another country, like you can burn the system down and then it's going to weaken you so much that some other power structure comes in. Chinese communists usually would be the heaviest contender, and they shrink them down even further. So like chaos abandons the poor, abandons the innocent, and that's what we kind of keep in mind for the anarchists. I know it's like exciting, right? To be a revolutionary. The problem with anarchy is it creates problems, right? So you have like you can have Bernie Sanders come in and say, hey, yeah, I find that interesting. Detail the specifics of universal high income, and he's still kind of bitchy about it, right? He's like, tell me about your cronies, and your crony buddies and how you're going to get that fixed. Well, the reality is he needs to define that, right? He needs to define what that structure is because, if they're going to use AI robotics to get stronger and stronger and stronger, okay, and you have an interest in distribution of the people, you need to come in and say, okay, we're going to put this distribution system on an auditable blockchain. Traditionally they have no plan. They just have a sense of what the good is. And then it's so sloppy that it creates a bureaucracy and it creates more problems. It just empowers academics who didn't really have to work for anything, build anything, and they just concentrate power and waste money, right? So their solution is, hey, we need to get these extremists. We're not going to resort to violence. We're going to support the institutions um, almost blindly. Well, what is the accountability mechanism, right? And I would argue that they need to articulate their redistribution method in a way that doesn't destroy the billionaires, right? They're like, if you try to destroy the billionaires, the problem is like they have AI robotics. They're just gonna wreck you. Like there's no way out of that. They'll create Terminator world, concentrate their power, and what are you then? Like there's no eating the billionaires. There's like, okay, how do you create some kind of equality or not some kind of reasonable distribution method for the wealth that we helped you unlock, right? Because you have these elements in tech as well. And so this is an odd bedfellow thing. This is why, San Francisco doesn't do military contracts, is because you have the leftist elements of, they don't want to be a part of a war contract. So they need to be specific about the system that doesn't just give blanket power to the institutions, right? The institutions already tax at 50%. They're not doing a good job of redistributing wealth. And, you know, there's a classic line of Reagan saying we need to reduce institutions to the size of we can drown in a bathtub. Well, we just need to make sure that they are run efficiently. This is why, like, why fight Doge when there's so much slop in the institutions themselves. I would say focus on blockchain, how to use blockchain to use AI robotics and bring these people into the fold. Like, you can have peace, land, and bread with unlimited technology. You have unlimited intelligence, unlimited workforce. You can have your outcome. Remember, your outcome isn't violence. Your outcome is the left, like they are the receiving end of this empire, right? So they're watching their um income shrink, their assets shrink, they can't buy a house, etc. They're mad. Okay, but what is the focus? Peace, land, and bread? Great. We're gonna support, ally with the Bernie side that's gonna have a system, and all this is dependent upon dialogue. Like we have to understand that, okay, you're not evil, you just have interests and they're a little bit different than mine. You have a little bit different approach. This is your bias, this is your downside, this is your upside, right? So build up what's your blockchain to distribute wealth that will be hyper concentrated but also magnified with the robotics AI revolution. They need to they need to ally with the institution to say, okay, we're gonna all magnify it. What is the blockchain infrastructure that does the distribution that this immense value creates? And and that's the problem. It's like it's that level of cooperation that takes right brain thinking, right? You have the vision. How are you going to build a system that brings that together? And that means you're not wasting your time going after. the right, which wants the same thing that you want. They just see that capitalism is historically it has been a pretty good way of distributing wealth. But with hyper concentration of technology and resources, that you're going to see increased concentration. So the Black 100, the traditionalists, just need to be flexible in that thinking that the games has changed. Okay, and they need to put their own perspective, on this blockchain, and everybody just needs to be flexible. If we find like this kind of infighting, these are diametrically kind of energetically opposed. If each person sees them as the problem and they just clash, it's a total waste, right? Then they're distracted. This is what happens. They weaken each other, right? And then you have these people growing stronger, and this is authoritarianism, right? Where you have such a high-tech infrastructure in society, instead of using that for wealth creation, you use that to control these people, weaken these people, right? Even these people who are nonviolent, they just want redistribution. So this is the outcome that is atypical. With like that generally happens, and then you have the clash, and if it's a certain point of the threshold, they'll get absorbed in the infrastructure, and then you have a bureaucracy that just concentrates more and more wealth until you have Venezuela's situation where you're so unpopular that some other foreign power comes in and collapses you and then tries to redistribute. You're trying to rebuild your society at that point. So that's the game. That's the players on the field, and good luck.